The healthcare industry just hasn't had access to this information, which is a joke. The problem is not only could they make more money by doing this, but they could actually save people's lives. Third-party app developers creating software for physicians. And then Epic could take, say, 30% take rate on the money spent on those third-party software apps. It would be such a fundamental game changer in their business model. Who can disrupt healthcare? The world's biggest companies. Who are the world's biggest companies? Platform companies. Here's the problem with Epic. Epic could make drastically more money if they were to embrace what Salesforce has done, which is two things. One, go to the cloud. Step one. Step two, let third-party developers get access to the EHR records. And because, again, when you're not in the cloud and you don't have as much standardization and centralization of the data, really now what needs to happen, if you want to get access to the EHRs, you have to go hospital by hospital. Sure, this Apple Allscripts thing helps you. But still, if you want to get access to the EHR data, you really need to go hospital system by hospital system. You need to have separate contracts with every hospital. It takes a very long time. It's expensive. It's arduous. I mean, there's just so many things that just make it unbelievably difficult to scale. Okay, so you got to go get all the hospitals on board. Or you could go to the cloud. Okay. Then you have to open up the data and you can let third-party developers build software on that. Here's my other problem with this Apple thing. I don't think it's as easy to monetize. If I'm a third-party software developer and I'm making apps, I think it's a much richer audience and you can provide much more utility to the consumer being a physician or a nurse or a doctor, right? In a hospital or in a clinic, as opposed to the consumer being the patient. And I think when you look at the world of third-party apps that can be created, if I have access to the EHR records, what are all the apps that I could go and create, right? I can scan those medical records. I can go and say, hey, you are probably more susceptible to this disease, or you should probably look at getting this medication. Or Salesforce has entire apps that aren't even looking and having intelligence about the data. They have entire apps that are just there to help you clean up the data and make the data more rich and complete and thorough, right? So then there's a whole field of apps just to do data cleanup and data quality improvements, separate from just inferring from that and then helping to basically just keep people healthier and reduce costs in the health system, which is a huge problem. Clearly, healthcare is, I think, 15% of the GDP and just continues to go up by 10 or 20% every year in cost. I mean, it's insane. And so if Epic were to be able to be in the Salesforce position of being an EHR that was in the cloud, that had third-party app developers creating software for physicians, and then Epic could take, say, 30% take rate on the money spent on those third-party software apps, it would be such a fundamental game changer in their business model. And then what they could do is they could actually, Salesforce hasn't even really, Salesforce still has a premium SaaS cost for just the SaaS software, but there is much more fragmentation seemingly in this than I think in the world of CRM, right? I think it's, there's more consolidation there. I think Salesforce has a much stronger position in CRM than probably what's going on in the EHR world.
I think the difference here is that Salesforce came in as a challenger. It wasn't Oracle that said, "Oh, hey, let's go do all this SaaS stuff." When we had on-prem business that was doing very well because it made tons of money. The same way that Epic and Cerner and these guys are doing. This current model is very profitable. There's huge lock-in costs once you get a customer in, because again, that process of changing to another system is just not really feasible in the current model versus a SaaS model that is a little more extensible and lightweight in terms of installation is a lot easier to switch. So that from that point of view, why would I go to the system where these lower switching costs? I could see why they've resisted that. I think the other issue here is regulation. So CRM software and that kind of sales data is not nearly as regulated as health data is. And for good reason. So I think that the regulation on this is starting to catch up. It's moving slowly, but I think we're moving in the direction where this kind of thing will become feasible, where it might not have been 5 years ago.
So I think that's the starting point. Is you get access to the EHR data, You build a community of third-party software developers that are looking at diagnostic information, that are looking at how you can help the physician make better decisions, as well as doing data cleanup and data quality and those kinds of things. That's a multi-billion-dollar industry right there, easily. Okay, but you got to get enough scale that you can have enough access to enough health records that you can make it worthwhile for the third-party software developer. You have to help the third-party software developer monetize. You have to figure out how you can get the physician to be able to spend money on third-party apps. And maybe there's a rev share with the healthcare system. Now, that would be if you are the platform and you can basically prevent the healthcare system from getting a rev share on that, then that's a big win, right? Otherwise, if the hospitals could team up and create some kind of consortium to demand some kind of rev share, that'd be very smart on the hospitals. But that's phase one to me. I mean, I think when you look at saying, so the healthcare industry just hasn't had access to this information, which is a joke. And it's actually my biggest gripe against Epic and Cerner is, yes, there hasn't been the challenger, the Salesforce challenger, but this industry needs it badly. And I actually feel no sympathy or empathy for the Epics and Cerners of the world if the challenger comes in and disrupts Epic and Cerner, because what the problem is, not only could they make more money by doing this, but they could actually save people's lives, right, reduce the cost of care, and improve people's lives. So it isn't just about who's making money and who's dominating market share. It's really about, are you saving people's lives and lowering the cost of care? And that, I think, is really why Epic and Cerner should actually have a big target on their back and should feel guilty that they aren't taking a more proactive approach on this. But then once you have that community going and you have access to the EHR, that's just the first phase of this, right? The next phase is, so what I've got up here is Verily. And this is Google's spin-out company. Verily is basically trying to do a marketplace for clinical trials, okay? So what that means is when you want to do a clinical trial, it's very fragmented, okay? Checkbox for marketplaces to reduce friction, increase transparency, connect that information. So it's very fragmented. There are tens of thousands of what you would call investigator sites, which are basically doctors and clinics that will work with patients that could then go through a clinical trial, and you need the doctor to monitor the patient, and the patient needs to come in regularly. Most of the time, some stuff you can do remotely, but it's very high touch. It's very expensive to do clinical trials. It's very hard just to find the patients to participate in the clinical trial, because you really want to finally curate who's doing that so that you can, as the drug company, get the optimal result from the clinical trial, and then your drug gets approved and you make a bunch of money. Okay. It's a very expensive process, and it takes years and years and years. Okay. Highly fragmented on just finding the doctors and the investigator sites. A. B. Highly fragmented then to just get access to the patients. Right. Okay. There have been entire acquisitions built solely on the thesis that if we get access to EHR data, we can improve our ability to successfully execute clinical trials. Example, Flatiron Health getting acquired by Roche. Yep. GSK just did a partnership with 23andMe, which was based off of the same thesis on clinical trials. So this is phase two. So Verily has now announced a consortium with Novartis, Otsuka, Pfizer, and Sanofi to basically go and use Verily's technology and AI to basically run better clinical trials. My problem with this is that they're focusing on multiple disease areas. I think it's 4 different disease areas. And it just seems so big and so grand. And you're just trying to bite off such a huge piece of this, right? So this will cover a range of clinical specialties: cardiovascular disease, mental health, and diabetes. Just do one. Just do one. Just do one and do it well. Just
start small.
Start small. Start small. Don't go do some big partnership in a big Google way, but focus on one disease area. I actually don't even want to know about it. I don't even want to know that there's a partnership. I just go do it in stealth. Don't even tell anyone about it. Go do 1 or 2 trials and show how. Here's the thing, right? Where are you reducing friction from a marketplace standpoint? Are you reducing friction to find patients and to figure out who's going to go into the marketplace? I think that's a big hurdle. I think this is actually less focused on that. I think it's more focused on the monitoring of the patients and the data that you're getting from the patients.
There's a lot of efforts with wearable and medical grade wearable devices and that kind of stuff to basically get more real-time data from the patient.
Yes.
So that you can improve accuracy and potentially how many trials ultimately you would need to do to get the kind of data you need.
And I think basically the theory there is I can have less participants in a trial to get enough basically critical mass to have a strong proof point of, the outcome.
Right.
And net, I should be able to do this faster, less people for less money, right? That's the theory.
Yeah. And part of that is because you have drop off in these trials. And if you can reduce that basically loss ratio of people that don't actually follow through and complete the whole thing, then that saves a lot of money.
So let's go full circle. Going back to our in the cloud dominant marketplace of EHR records and health record information, which starts out as an app marketplace. The next phase of this is a services marketplace to say, hey, I can now look at all these people in my centralized database of all these EHR records. And now I can say, oh my God, well, I would love for these people to come and participate in my trial. Let me get in touch with them. How could I find the physician? This is why I think this is the primary consumer in this platform model is the physician first, patient second. And this goes back to the whole thing about investigator sites. You really want to embrace the physician. And then what's all the now software I can deliver to the physician through my app marketplace, my dev platform, to the physician to now run the clinical trial better, which is really, I think, where Verily's baseline project is more focused on. I actually see a huge hurdle and somewhat lower hanging fruit on the matchmaking and just finding who should participate in the trial first as an entry point. So that's phase 2 for me of our grand vision of how to reinvent the healthcare industry here. What's phase 3? Phase 3 is on drug discovery. And this is where if you want to then look at saying, okay, now let's look at rare diseases. Rare diseases are diseases that affect less than 10,000 people. So if you just think about big pharma, it's very hard for them to focus all the resources going back to the cost of doing a clinical trial. It's very hard for them to focus on actually doing the clinical trial and all that cost when just the potential customer base is relatively very small.
Right.
It's just very arduous. So rare diseases, what basically needs to happen is you need to democratize access to data and embrace an ecosystem model. The CEO of Novartis has kind of been picking around on this. He did a podcast with Andreessen a few months ago. You can tell he's kind of thinking about this. I don't think he's fully there yet, but he's kind of saying, how could I open this up? How could I open up the IP, the data that we have to biotech startups, to a few researchers that just got their doctorate degree, and subvert the VCs. I think it's really been a lot of VCs that have been the ones kind of spawning biotech startups. I think instead what you're doing is finding tech entrepreneurs,
ways to give them access without huge upfront costs.
Exactly, and then you can now dive into this pool of data and say, hey, here's an opportunity for me to create a therapeutic to solve a rare disease in this area. So there's a few other blockers that are usually involved with that, but those are actually the huge initial hurdle points are just getting access to the data, trying to find and validate your initial theory, and then you could go raise a round of VC. It could be from the pharmas, it could be from traditional VCs. Right now, you've kind of gotten that initial validation. Right now, just getting access to the data and trying to say, hey, here's a theory. I want to commit myself to solving this. Right. And it's going to be very hard for big pharma to actually fund that stuff. Just if you have
Novartis bought this company called Avexis, and Avexis basically solves the rare disease that causes blindness in the eye. They did it through gene therapy. They use this thing called a viral vector. And basically what that means is use virus. It's literally out of a Mission Impossible movie because you use like virus to deliver the drug, the therapeutic. Therapeutic isn't some fancy word. It just means drug. Okay, so you deliver the drug using virus to that part of the body. It's very actually hard to say, if I do have the solution, if I have created the therapeutic to solve blindness in the eye, it's actually then very hard to actually deliver that drug to the eye and have the eye receive it. And then so you can actually solve the disease. So they use this thing called a viral vector. It's basically using virus to deliver the drug to the eye. And it worked. And so I remember I was at the Aspen Health Conference a couple of years ago with one of the founders of Avexis, and he was saying, there are 20 rare diseases in the eye. I solved one of them, or we solved one of them. We are now working on number 2 and number 3. Novartis bought us for billions of dollars. And so he said, I can use the same viral vector, the same delivery truck mechanism to now deliver number 2 and number 3 and number 4 therapeutic to the eye. And I said, hold on. I think his name is Brian. I said, hold on, Brian. How much of this, is this 80% the same delivery truck, 90% same delivery truck, 100% same delivery truck? He goes, 100% the same delivery truck. I can use this now mechanism to deliver the therapeutic to that part of the eye. That to me is a game changer. And especially now, if you think about having centralized access to health records, being able to now figure out, hey, I could solve maybe disease number 12 in the eye, which by the way, I don't know, Novartis will try and work on in like 2035. No offense to Novartis. It's just
the economics of it.
The economics of it. It's just, you're not going to go all the way down there. And then the other part of this, and I think where you can really see a democratization of access in drug discovery to actually solve, say, rare diseases at scale by embracing, who are the producers in this scenario? They're the small tech startups and biotech startups. But you're now giving them access to data. And then I think the other part of this is giving them access to IP, actual pharma IP. Things like the delivery mechanism. You hear a lot about CRISPR, these CRISPR licenses being sold off for hundreds of millions or billions of dollars to pharma companies. And so they're using CRISPR, which is basically just another delivery mechanism. There's multiple delivery mechanisms. There's CRISPR, there's gene therapy, there's viral vectors. mRNA would fall into another one of those buckets. So just think about, there's delivery mechanisms, and then there's the data and the software to create the therapeutic. And pharma basically locks all this stuff up today. So how can you open that up and say, look, I'm never going to develop solution number 12. But hey, I would like to cure people's problems, cure blindness, and make some money off of it. I don't need to own 100% of the money. But if I could accelerate that drug discovery timeline and getting that drug to market by 10 or 20 years, which is realistic when you're talking about number 10 through 20 rare diseases in the eye, and maybe you make 30% or 40% or hell, 50% of a royalty on those drugs, but your exposure and capital is limited because you're now opening this up. I mean, that's a win-win-win. And so my hope is that, again, I think that one is actually very far away. But the first step here is to open up data and start building this centralized database of health records, getting the physician involved, providing monetization down to tech startups. And then I think eventually you start to see this thing branch out into clinical trials and into drug discovery. But this is the starting point. And unfortunately, because of Epic and Cerner, and just, using kind of regulation like HIPAA as the scapegoat, we just haven't been able to see significant innovation or disruption in this industry. But hopefully it's time.
So if Epic or Cerner aren't the ones who are going to do this, where would this come from? Where would this kind of innovation push come from?
This was my panel at the Milken conference, was who can disrupt healthcare? The world's biggest companies. Who are the world's biggest companies? Platform companies. I think Google. I think Apple, clearly. And Amazon's getting into this from a pill pack acquisition standpoint, right? On the distribution side, that's a whole other ballgame. Why are PBMs, pharmacy benefit managers, taking 50 cents on the dollar from pharma companies? So the CVS Aetna merger, thing of beauty for CVS. Hey, guess what? CVS's stores are in big trouble, just like every other sector of retail. Where does CVS's margin really come from? The pharmacy stuff that they're doing, the healthcare stuff that they're doing, and PBMs are taking 50 cents on the dollar. So for every dollar I spend on a drug or on a pill, they're keeping 50 cents. I mean, what other distribution mechanism keeps that level of margin? I mean, literally nothing. And they're basically doing all these one-off deals with the pharma companies to figure out how to give rebates and preferential treatment and how you're going to, who's going to get the best placement and the biggest distribution.
Right.
And I think the thing that really prompted the Amazon acquisition of PillPack was that these PBMs were threatening the health insurance companies to say, if PillPack remains, we're going to, this whole thing is going to change. They're trying to shut out PillPack, which is just basically, if you don't know what PillPack is, Amazon bought it for $1 billion a few years ago, and it's actually awesome. What they started to do, I think they were working with geriatrics or like actually a very niche portion of the market. And what they're saying is, I'm going to send you the pills you need to take, and I'm going to put them in little packages for you. So I know my mom, she actually has one of those 7-day little pill containers with every day of the week, and then they get all the pills in the box, and then you got to put them into the container.
Yeah, it can be as simple as, certain vitamins and things. Oh, my doctor said I should take more vitamin D or whatever it is. So
right.
I can get that, and I know I have to take this every day, and it makes it very easy.
And they do that for you, and they give you a little packet, and you just say, eat this packet every day,
and they mail it to you.
And they don't have all the overhead and all this overhead from all these stores that no one is using and no one really needs. And by the way, if you're older, it's actually harder for you to get up and then go to the store and get your stuff. It's actually easier for it just to be mailed to me. So like the whole PBM concept is that, we have proximity to all these people and we can now give you better access. It's a load of baloney. So anyway, lots of change hopefully coming to healthcare. And I think the big tech platforms and monopolies are going to be able to crack this nut, and they're working on it. And I really do wish them the best and share no empathy for these incumbents that could make more money if they did embrace this. And more importantly, would be able to save more lives. It's a real shame. Hi, this is Alex Mozed. Thanks for joining us on Winner Take All. If you enjoyed the content today, which I bet you did, please comment, subscribe, and definitely message me on Twitter when we're doing live streams. Also, please note, all opinions expressed about stocks or public companies on the show are exactly that, opinions. This is not investment advice. Don't act on it. WisdomTree licensed Applico's Platform Insights data product to aid in the creation of the PLAT ETF. Thanks for joining us.